especially in Ivy schools and IGCSE schools, if not the other boards as well. How did the shift happen and why has it happened now? We learned ABC the traditional way, A for apple, B for ball, and now you look at kids, it's all phonics. Is there a right way? So how do we as parents support children who are learning with the phonics methodology? How do we teach them at home? What is it that we can do to support their education?
When I was a teenager and I was asked to accompany a friend's son for an interview for admission at a school, he had been taught by his parent. He began with asking him, "What's your name?" This boy kept saying, "My name is my name." It's because he had just memorized what had been taught to him, what he had been trained to say.
There are parents who believe that the mother tongue is what should be focused on and should be built on in the early years. Does it confuse the children or are they able to pick up both the languages easily?
In India, we are culturally so diverse. We have so many languages going. And if you're in a household where even if you have grandparents who have some background of coming from another city or another state, and then you have the parents, then you have the helpers, another language on the road, they are assimilating everything.
Do you see children coming up with ChatGPT written answers in your work? And are you able to identify that, hey, this is not written by you, go back? How does a parent read to their child? For the longest time, English was only seen as a medium of communication. We had other important subjects like math, physics, chemistry, which were all seen as more important. And English was only a tool for people to understand those subjects. But that conversation and that thought process is changing right now. English is being seen as an important subject by itself, and the literacy and their children's understanding of the language is being focused on more by parents and teachers. Schools are starting to invest in literacy programs. Parents are learning to figure out how to educate their children in the language of English from very early on. We're going to talk a lot more about that today. We have Ms. Uma Selvakumar and Ms. Jyotsna Nanda to talk about English literacy from the Reading Resources, the Literacy Center. Welcome, both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I'm Vinodini.
And I'm Kavita.
We're here to Kapsha, keeping up with parenting. So as I said, right, English as a language was only seen as a mode of communication, or it still is, but when it comes to school education, right, or just something enough to understand all the other core subjects or important subjects. But that has somehow shifted, especially in Ivy schools and IGCSE schools, if not the other boards as well. How did the shift happen and why has it happened now?
So I think parents are now more aware. Of course, math and science is very important, but now they are more aware that the basic comprehension and language, everything comes from a strong foundation with literacy education.
Yeah, and to think about it, there's no subject you can do without having the language to understand what it is, whether it is science, solving math problems. They need to know the words. They need to know the language to be able to understand what is that they are asking you to do. If that is not there, children are going to just be stalled because they are not just adding, subtracting, dividing, and, multiplying. They are solving problems. And for that, they need that language to understand what is it that's being asked for them.
And a strong foundation in literacy will help them across the curriculum, whether it is math, science, social studies, history, because there's so much of comprehension that is required. Yeah.
No, that's true. A friend actually sent over a third grader's math homework. Mm-hmm. And the main aspect of it, the math part was really simple. The main aspect of it was the English or the comprehension portion because they had made it quite complicated. And when I'd actually gone and asked a teacher who was a math teacher, why is it like this? This is very simple math. You're just complicating it. She was like, but this is how real life is going to be. The math that you use in your life is not going to be trigonometry or anything else. It's going to be very simple math. Yeah. It's your ability to understand what is it that you need to do, which is what we're trying to do.
Following the instructions, understanding what the thing is about.
What are they asking us to solve? Yeah. Because sometimes kids look at numbers and they think, okay, I need to add or multiply, especially if they're English language learners. And that's where the language comes in. Because sometimes these problems have more than one step. True. They just give up because they say, oh, I need to just multiply or I need to just divide. So that's why it's important for them to have their vocabulary, the understanding of what is being asked of us to do.
It's not only understanding of the question. When you put your ideas or your thoughts on paper, if you don't have a strong foundation, you're not able to relate what is in your head, what the question is asking of you, right? So,
Absolutely.
Now, even think about it when you answer a question in math and you just write the answer. It's not acceptable. What does that answer mean? If they didn't have the language to answer that, 26 apples were sold or 26 apples were bought, that becomes more important.
Yeah.
So are there any, and parents these days are focusing on language and learning language, but what are the long-term impacts of starting, education in reading and writing early on? What do you think are the impacts these students will have?
Why should they start earlier? Huh? Yes. Think about this way. Kids nowadays, even during our times to some extent, but during these days, they have print everywhere. They have hoardings, they have media, they go to supermarkets, they're looking at packaging, they look at packages, what's out there. Unless they have some knowledge, of what they are looking around them, they can't make sense of it. And that can come with some basic education at home. For example, in the morning when they're having a cereal, if they see the cereal box, they know that it's a cereal. And when you take them to supermarkets, and I've heard moms say, okay, let's go buy cereal. And they quickly go because they know they can make that connection. It's not only the shape of the box or the look of it, but they can symbolically probably look at the symbols of the word, words as symbols or letters as symbols and buy what they're looking for.
But I have a question for you about the ABC versus the phonics debate. We learned ABC the traditional way, A for apple, B for ball, C for cat and whatnot. And now you look at kids, it's all phonics, it's all sound-based. Is there a right way and a wrong way? I'm going to ask you this because all parents are like, we learned it that way, this has changed, which is right? So does that mean what we learned is wrong? Or is there no right way? What is the answer?
and then we also are able to read and write.
Yeah. So there are two ways to look at it. There are two approaches. One is the language approach and one is the phonic approach. The language approach answers the question that you had initially. What is it to build early literacy skills? And language is what happens automatically. From the time the child is born, they're learning, they're listening to the parents talking, speaking, singing, all of that. So they need the language comprehension. Actually, that is automatic. They're learning it from the parents and they're making meaning out of the language. That's the first step actually for them. Then in the language approach itself, what is happening over there is they're building vocabulary. That's what is happening. They're building vocabulary there. They're learning so many concepts there. They're learning comprehension. When you're talking to them, they're understanding what you're talking about and also they're giving back an answer. So that is the language approach. But simultaneously, once they have to start reading, then you're looking at alphabets, which are A, B, C, D, which is completely invented. It doesn't come automatically. You're learning it. You're looking at those symbols and you have to make meaning out of it. That's where comes the symbol and the sound of it there. And that is the phonics approach. So once they start reading, the phonics approach helps them to be able to look at letters and the sounds they make, and then be able to correlate them together and understand and then to slowly decode. So I would say both of these are required. You need a language approach and the phonics
So
approach.
in the phonics approach, would you still recommend that they learn ABC or just go with the sound?
Absolutely. You have to learn your ABC. You have to identify
That is
the
the first
letters.
step.
That's the first step.
That's news to me.
Yeah, of
Like
course.
the capital A, B, C.
Oh,
Is
yes.
that essential?
Yeah, that's how you start the song. A, B, C, D, the song starts.
Consonant sounds actually are the first ones you
Yeah.
start with.
So-
like cat,
Yeah, understanding that there are 26 letters in the alphabet and knowing the name of the letter, you have to know the name of the letter and then associate it with the sound that it.
And there are 46 or 48 types of sounds. There's what
48.
combinations make, So they have to know the alphabet first.
So when you say know the alphabet, so in phonics, you have the capital letter and you have the sound, which is typically the
Absolutely.
smaller
Yeah.
letter. Right? So you're
Yeah.
saying they have to know both at the same time?
That is explicit and systematic teaching of it.
yeah.
So that doesn't happen like how the kids are learning language when you're speaking to them. It doesn't happen that way. You need to teach it to them. You need to give them explicit instruction as to what the sound, this alphabet makes this sound. So that's how you start. So the phonemic to begin with, when you're speaking to the kids, they're learning the language, but they're listening to also all the sounds in the language that you speak, which is the phonemic awareness. And that is very important. That's the basic foundation. Then comes phonics. That is where you're explicitly teaching them the letters and the sound correlation. Then, of course, you're teaching them how to blend the sounds together and all different word patterns in it. And based on that, the kids are able to make meaning out of what they know from language as well as the phonics. So I would say a balance of both, right, is most important.
The question we have as teachers is most of it here is in small letters. The only place we use the capital letter is for the start of the sentence or for a proper noun. So does it make sense to start off with only the sounds first and then somehow automatically they gain knowledge of the letters, or they should be taught the letters along with the sounds?
So there is one thought, and I haven't gone very deep into it, that why do we teach kids capital A, B, C, D all the way through, and then we go to the lowercase, because most of the writing is done in lowercase.
Right.
Why are we not focusing on the lowercase?
First. Yes. First. That's a question even I had, because a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old's brain can only grasp so much, and even their attention span can only last so much, where they'd only be able to give a certain amount. So that's a question even I've been having, because it can end up being too much for them as well.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is, going back to my original question, there is no one method. It's a combination of both, which is what would work for a child in terms of growing up. So my follow-up question is, we are all educated in a very traditional ABC sort of learning when it comes to English or reading the alphabets. So how do we as parents support children who are learning with the phonics methodology? How do we teach them at home? What is it that we can do to support their education when it comes to English? Because we don't know this. We're not trained to. And I'm assuming as parents, if we tried to help, it would do more harm than good to try and teach them phonics, something we don't know well enough.
So I think what parents should be doing is to build language, to talk to the kids all the time. And through those words, the kids are listening to sounds, right, of all. Now, if you're talking only about phonics being done in school, and what can they do? Well, it is good to know a little bit about phonics, right? It is doesn't do any harm. So a little bit of knowledge. There are a lot of YouTube videos, there are apps, and there are books that explicitly teach you what letter makes what sound. So it would be nice if parents can also understand. Doesn't mean that they have to know everything, but definitely phonics has to be taught by a trained instructor. That's how it has to be done. But parents knowing it will help reinforce the skills that they're learning at home. At school.
And they can do it through games. They can, you get those board games where you add the beginning sound, and then you bring in the middle sound, and then you make a word out of it. That's for a little older kids. But you can always have them, listen to those the songs. Like we had that A, B, C, D. But now we have videos where you can get for phonics also. And then you have these puzzles. They put the pieces together.
Lovely.
Very active, interactive things are there.
Can you think of any resources off the top of your head which will benefit parents to learn about phonics? Anything that you can think of?
There is Bananagrams. There is a game. There are lots of other word games that you can play. Now, if you look on the internet, there are so many of those word games that you can play. Like Mr. Vasna was talking about, beginning sounds, ending sounds, middle sounds. So there are a lot of the games that but the play way is the best way. That's how kids learn best.
Naturally, when they hear the sound, and then when you're teaching them, they make those connections. But at home, you're not teaching them specifically like an instructor or a teacher in a classroom would do.
Yeah.
But then what we see is, we can do the phonics in school, but without the external support coming from the parents, sometimes it gets difficult for them to take it all in, because there is too many things, too many letters, too many sounds, along with the capital letters that we teach. And even if the parents were to sit and teach, they need to know the right way to teach that she's there. And sometimes certain letters don't sound the same way.
Absolutely.
The way we teach them in school and the way a parent would teach. For example, M, we teach them differently. Whereas when the kid goes back home and comes back with another knowledge of instead of is mom.
Yeah.
So those are things that we don't know as parents. So we are somehow harming our children, thinking we're doing the right thing, thinking we're sitting with them and teaching them.
And that is why we keep saying it is very technical, and leave it to the
Yes.
instructors.
So I would
And
say-
you involve them by actively engaging them in games and, which have the sound they naturally hear. And they are not going to make, the words which we commonly use. They hear it and they are going to make the association when the teacher is bringing that into the classroom. And then in the classroom, it's structured in a way where you're not giving them too much at that time. Every age has what they need to learn. So we are not overloading them.
Right. When we talk about reading, right, how early on do you think parents should start reading to their kids?
So we would say as early as possible. Yes. Which is even when they're babies, you're singing to them, you're singing lullabies, your nursery rhymes, you're reading, take a book. And nowadays they have the board books where you are, with so much of, so many pictures and just the right words. But even picking up a book and reading every day for 10 minutes before bedtime or any stipulated time is good. So
Reading can start as early as
As
6 months.
early as possible.
They're just hearing songs at that time. They're just hearing songs. They're hearing poems with allitrations. They're hearing with rhymes. We have some examples like Hickory Dickory Dock, the mouse went up to the clock. Here you have a rhyme. Then you have with allitrations also. So they're hearing it all the time. They're not reading, they're not writing, they're not doing, they're just listening.
That's interesting. So because I have been reading to my son a little bit, he's about a year old, and now he can identify his favorite book. It's a 10-sentence book. That's all the book has. It's a picture book. But he can identify his favorite book, bring it from the bookshelf where his books and his sister's books are mixed up, and throw it on my lap and say, read this. He hasn't spoken yet, but he's able to do this.
So you just think about the impact you've had on this child. Your reading from that book time and again has made it so interesting for him. There's something that hooks him onto that book, whatever it is. Other books have not attracted him as yet. That's why he's bringing it back to you. And don't say, oh, I've read it so many times. Just read it again and again till he brings you another one. Or you tell him, let's choose another one today. So that is the beauty of
that's where I would say reading begins. You see, that's the impact you've made on your child. So having those 5 or 10 books that you've been reading to him again and again, and repetition is very important. And slowly he's making that association there.
Is repetition a good thing when it comes to reading for children at an early age?
Yes, very
especially reading from a book, the repeated words, they learn vocabulary that way. They learn sounds, they learn everything.
So
They're okay with the repetition.
they love it. For example, Eric Carl's Brown Bear, all throughout. It's brown bear, what do you see? And then I see a green frog looking at me or something to that effect. But see the number of skills the kids are learning. One, the words repeated again and again. Then is the association with the picture. You're teaching them the animals and then so many different things. And the sight words that are repeated over and over again. And so that, so that makes an impact. And they're
notice
building
that,
language.
we have not brought in phonics as yet.
Right?
This is natural reading.
Yeah.
And that's how we all learn naturally to read, In the sense, by naturally, I mean that, looking at the word and, repeated sound that we were hearing, we recognize that a brown bear looks like this, the word. They can get confused, but this word is maybe out of context, they may not get it. But there's a picture, there's a letter, there's sometimes brown bear is written also in the color brown. How many things are they learning at that time?
So, Ms. Jyotsna, have you, in your years of experience, have you seen examples of children just, not knowing English enough to be able to comprehend what the other person's saying, just because of the inability at home or the lack of resources at home to teach them, how to comprehend, how to understand? And how do schools or how do teachers correct that or help children like that?
So I'm thinking about a time when I was a teenager and I was asked to accompany a friend's son for an interview for admission at a school. And he had been taught by his parent that they will first ask you, what's your name? How many sisters you have? How many brothers you have? What's your father's name? What's your mother's name? And we went with that. in our mind. Even I was young at that time. And then when we went there, I remember what they call the father of the school, that is the principal. He began with asking him, "What's your name?" And this boy kept saying, my name is because he had just memorized what had been taught to him, what he had been trained to say. But he had never been explained that, what father is, or what your name, and what should you say. And the question, and the pointer that the questions can come in any way. It's not necessary that it's going to come in the way I'm teaching you. So this education wasn't there, and the person who was helping the child at home kind of put him at a disadvantage where he had gone for an admission. The school did take him in, and probably just listening around and learning from whatever the teachers were teaching, he did pretty well for himself. He picked up the language, which he didn't have very early on. But he had the struggle and challenge, and we could see and foretell that this is not going to be an easy entry for him.
So, a child whose parents read to the child at 6 months versus a child who, out of his or her own interest, starts reading at 10 years or 11 years. That's when they think that they can go to a library, pick up a grade. Does this child have a significant advantage over another child who starts?
Yes, it has a big advantage because, as I told you, the language approach is very important. They're learning a lot of different concepts about the world. So, for example, let us say a child has learned something. She's read a book about going to the zoo and has even been to the zoo, knows all the animals from that. That child has a great advantage from a child who's never read a book about a zoo and has all the different names of an animal. So, yes, they have big advantage. Benefits are there in terms of once they get into school, being able to read early, there's academic success, feeling confident, self-esteem, and feeling better when they are exposed to language and being able to read earlier.
Having a prior knowledge definitely is an advantage to them. They already know, they go into a classroom, how many animals do you know? The list will be longer if you have been exposed to it. So having that background has been built up, the foundation for knowing about the forest life, or for, living in jungle. So many different kinds of books parents read to the kids, and they're visually seeing those books. For a kid who doesn't pick up a book will not have that knowledge. So definitely that's literacy starting very early in life.
So again, going back, you give them that kind of a background at home. But there are parents who believe that the mother tongue is what should be focused on and should be built on in the early years. So when that is the case, they are focusing on that language and they are in school learning another language. Does it confuse the children, or are they able to pick up both the languages easily?
I think both. I think, in fact, children are at an advantage when they can speak fluently in their mother tongue, and then they are also exposed to another language. And so that's when they can learn another language very well. So it is, that's true.
Initially, there used to be people saying, expose the child to one language at a time. But of late, whatever I'm reading, they're talking about exposing the child to multiple languages, especially very early on, because that improves their capacity to understand those languages.
Just go to our basic growing up times. We didn't hear just one language. Yeah. Anywhere in the world, especially in Indian household, especially where in India we are culturally so diverse, we have so many languages going. And if you're in a household where, even if you have grandparents who have some background of coming from another city or another state, and then you have the parents, then you have the helpers, then another language on the road, they are assimilating everything. It may not come out, you may not see it, but definitely, I don't think there's any harm in learning.
Half the households in this country speak at least a minimum of 3 languages, with English and their mother tongue being one.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so I think that's a fantastic thing that we're exposing our children to very rich culture and heritage. I mean, we have it. Why not expose them to it?
Absolutely.
To just glorify it.
Yeah,
I think we have a wider view of the world, and that's where we can go from so many different states speaking different languages. Whereas in most countries, the language is only one throughout the country. And nothing has stalled us from, in government jobs or in the army or entering schools when our parents have jobs which, take us from one state to another.
So moving on, what role does storytelling have in reading and writing?
It has a big role to play. So I think we are all storytellers, and there's something I read about recently is that when you tell a story, any kind of information, and you're telling it as a story, it sticks. So when you are telling them a story, they relate to it. It sparks off their imagination, their creativity. They start thinking beyond. So all of the storytelling is very important for building language.
And storytelling is language. It is
Yeah.
rich language you're listening to. You're seeing them enacted, the thoughts, the expressions a storyteller has. You're looking at the face of the storyteller, and then you are saying, oh, happy. And if you're saying happy and you give a smile, what connections these 2-year-olds are making? That is the main thing.
That is a fabulous, I think, mode of education for not just for younger children, even for the older children.
Absolutely.
I've been to a couple of sessions when I've seen the parents as engrossed as children in what the storyteller has.
Absolutely.
They just capture your interest in. We used to have in our tribal areas, we have those, what they call pala. Pala is they dance and they sing and they recite. This has been happening over years and centuries. So storytelling is nothing new. And people have just grown up with, before the books came, it was a storytelling, sitting under the tree and listening to stories.
And also,
And the knowledge came from there.
yes, and like Kavita was asking, how does it build? There are lots of skills that you can incorporate in storytelling, right from, as we said, building vocabulary, from teaching them different story elements, and all of this it really helps the kids to also then convert it into the books, be able to
I think that aspect of storytelling also brings out their ability to connect with their emotions, put sort of language and emotions together. That's brought out very well through storytelling.
Yes,
I feel
true.
that.
So we use that storytelling elements. What age do you think you can start talking about storytelling elements versus just listening to a story, enjoying the story?
I think by 3, the 2.5, 3, the kids understand quite a bit. So there are lots of things that you could ask when you're reading out a story. So who do you think is the main character? Who was, what was the problem in the story? Well, we are going to kind of pitch in and, kind of help them out with it. But there are a lot of different conversations that you can have with them. There are a lot of discussions that can go. It can be a simple book that you are reading to them, but still through storytelling. For example, let us say Little Red Riding Hood, which is very, very popular, and you start very young. You're going to tell them a story with a different voice modulation, tell them which are the parts which are actually going to, kind of get them thinking. But what are the different skills that you're talking? So who was this character who was there throughout the story? It was Little Red Riding Hood. And who did she meet? So who was, the wolf? There's so much conversation happening over there. Of course, when they get a little older and think there was a problem in the story, do you think that there was a problem in the story? And then comes that she wasn't listening to her mom and she spoke to a stranger and then she went. So it depends on the age group that you are talking to. What is it that you want to focus?
So what you're saying is when you're reading a book to a child, whether it's you just reading or storytelling, discussing about the book is as important as reading the book itself.
Absolutely. You need to discuss the book with them. You need to talk to them. So let us say you're talking to a 2.5-year-old and then you're reading the same book, or let's say 3 Little Pigs. So you can talk about, so what animals are these? And then you talk about the pigs and then the wolf and how many of these pigs are there. There are 3. So you're bringing number skills.
You're engaging with the
You're engaging, yeah.
the book. You're engaging with the book. The child has to be engaged with the book. My takeaway here is you use the elements of storytelling. We are not expecting them to memorize those. There's this character they're setting.
Yeah.
The more I say, the character Red Riding Hood, somewhere down out of the 10, at least 5, 6 will get it now. Some will get it later. And when they hear it next time, the same word being used, they make those connections. So without actually learning and memorizing or story elements are character, setting, plot.
Yeah.
They are being naturally introduced to them. So Red Riding is an amazing character,
Yeah.
It is how.
Your question about discussing the story, you can also discuss in a way where you relate it to their experiences at home. So if it's about 3 Little Pigs, then you talk about what kind of a house you live in. Do you think the wolf can come and blow down your house? So they start thinking. They probably would say no, but because our house is built on bricks, so it will not fall down. you can connect it to real life experiences also.
No, I think that's fabulous and something we should all do a little more. Discuss those books, because sometimes we also see it as a chore.
Yeah.
20 minutes of reading. Okay, we're done. Let's go to bed because we're tired at the end. Right?
And that's why when you read, you're stopping. You're stopping many times. And you hold the book where you're showing the kid the pictures, you know. They are looking at it. You don't read to yourself. They are looking at it. They're picking up things. Their eyes are roving on the book. You could point out also.
So I'm going to ask this question to both of you again. How does a parent read to their child?
You mean physically? You mean physically what should be the right way?
Yeah, with enthusiasm, with excitement. Every time you pull out a book saying that I really love this book, it depends on the age also. You're going to talk and your conversations are going to be according to their age appropriate. But yes, with a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of discussions as well.
Got it.
Yeah.
And as you said, Ms. Jyotsna.
I would, whatever Uma said, I agree with her. And if I'm lying down and reading, the child is next to me, not on another pillow. The same pillow can be in the crook of my arm, depending on how old it is. I'm sharing the book. I'm not reading. The book is not mine. He can also hold the book if the letters are large enough for you to read. Yeah, the child can hold the book and you can read together and start pointing. And especially if there are pictures, stop at that page. What is this kid doing in this picture? You can do it before, like a prediction. What do you think is going to happen now in the story? Or you can do it after. What happened? You can change. The more interaction and engagement you have, the more the child is going to learn and assimilate what he or she is hearing.
So I have a instance and I want you to tell me what you think of it. So whenever I read to my child, she chooses the book sometimes. And when she chooses the book, that book is something we've probably read 20 or 30 times. And she's at an age where she's starting to read right now. So she will look at it, look at the sentences, and she can't read. But what she will do, she will, I don't know, those exact sentences seem to come out of her mouth and her head, maybe because she's heard it so many times. She just keeps telling me word to word on what's on the book, but somehow I don't think she's reading at all.
If you had been pointing to the words and reading to them, it can be automatic recognition as well, which happens with sight words, and she notes. And because it's repetitive, this is a dog, the next one is like, I see a boy climbing a tree, I see a bird climbing flying. It depends on the pattern in which the book is going and the repetition. And she's seen you read aloud to you so many times, so then she's probably, getting it out of memory and she knows exactly
and it's
how
okay.
it is okay, absolutely.
There you go, Amma, I've read the book and I don't know if it's right or if it's wrong. I just know that a 5-year-old's outwitted me.
And also remember, you didn't ask her to memorize it. It was not, she has memorized it, which is natural. Shows that she has a skill. In fact, it's a great skill that she has, that she's listening. She's listening and remembering and able to tell again. That is beautiful.
Interesting. So when I choose the book, she doesn't agree to read that book. She's like, why don't we read this? So that's a ongoing, I wouldn't say battle, but it's a little bit of a thing we have between us.
You will have to casual her in a way. Okay, let's do it like this. We read this and then what Mama chooses, Mama will read.
Or you can have particular days. So today, Monday, Wednesdays and Fridays that you will choose the book, and the other days I will choose the book for you. Yeah, you can do that also.
Something like Ms. Jyotsna said something about the book struck a chord with her, that she wants to go back to the same book over and over again.
So I would like to add something interesting to this, which I read about, and this is creating print awareness. Even understanding when you're reading a book, that you're actually reading from a book and what you're reading. So there's an interesting story about this dad who was reading to his daughter. For every single day, he would read to her and she would be so happy and excited to read, and they would sit and hold the book together and he was reading. And one fine day he was reading and her hand was there, a thumb was, covering one of the words. And his father, he said, you have to move your hand, because actually, and she didn't understand what he was talking about. And then he realized that she didn't understand that it was those words is what he was converting into the story and reading it out. Then realized it. So he had to go back and point to the words to say that these are the words that I'm actually reading to you, which the child did not actually
Lovely.
make that connection. She just thought she was looking at the pictures in awe and thought her father was just making up these stories, but she was not making the connection that the print was the one that was written there, the father was reading aloud. So the print awareness, creating print awareness is very important. Like, like you were asking, holding the book, saying, let me talk. This is the cover page. This is the title. It says the cat or whatever it says over there. Right. Pointing to the words so that they understand that it is these words that they are.
And this is what brings me back to the importance of storytelling. The storytelling begins even before the story reading begins. When parents are telling short stories, and a mouse came and, those kind of things. When we are there making them wear the socks or when we are trying to feed something, these are the storytelling moments. Then we start reading. We can't just start, reading. I wonder if the kids even understand that the father or the mother is reading from a book and there's a, what's happening. So I think just even having the touch books. You have the touch books where the color and the fruits and all are there and the noise, the sounds they make. Yeah. Kids love it. You begin with those one word on a page kind of a thing, or those one of the letters of the alphabet, whatever you choose to do. But the storytelling and listening to stories starts earlier, even when you're humming to them and,
That's beautiful, right? We don't think of parents humming to their children or singing lullabies to their children or just all those stories to just make them read some story. We don't think of all of that as a foundation, but they clearly are. Right.
And there's sometimes no sense in what we are saying because we are sort of run out of ideas and we are just making it up as we are feeding or dressing them up or things like that.
And so there are different types of texts, like there's fiction, there's non-fiction, there's poetry. Do we need to actively expose our children to all these different types of texts, or is it something that they pick up on their own? Where is that balance?
We always lean towards the genre we want, right? But we have to guide the kids. Suma and I have been talking to some teachers and we wanted them to understand the value of historical fiction. They were so stuck in realistic fiction, And now they are loving it. First they said, what connection it makes for us to read the history of another country in literature. And then we told them that the value of the book is not only in the story, but what is it that the character did and what is it that the character learned in that story. And they are loving those experiences, which they would never have thought of giving it to their kids. That wasn't their choice of preference, for the genres.
What age would that?
These were in the lower and upper, fourth onwards.
Right from grade 1, you can start introducing them to different genres.
Fantasy and realistic fiction is right away.
Very important to talk to them about fiction and non-fiction. Right from grade 1 onwards. So what is fiction? What is non-fiction? That's the first big category that comes there, to understand fiction is all about make-believe and imagination, and it is not true. Whereas non-fiction is all facts. And it's real. So first, understanding fiction and non-fiction is very important. And then, of course, poetry comes. Poetry is all about play with words. Yeah. It's rhyme, it's rhythm, so much more, it's a lot of fun to read. So this is very important for them to understand fiction, non-fiction, and poetry. Big.
Poetry also comes from grade 1, starts at grade 1?
Well,
I would say poetry comes even before because we're singing and
I think with the lullabies comes poetry and it's just holding on to those and still exposing them.
Yeah.
And they understand that there is writing which has rhymes in it. There is maybe couplets. I'm just saying that. But they will know that sometimes the rhymes come immediately. Sometimes they come after 3-4 lines.
That's the kind of poetry I was referring to. Where they start to enjoy. As young as 2, they're listening to a lot of songs and rhymes. But when is it that they actually can develop a love for poetry and start writing their own poetry?
See, all of this I feel has to be explicitly taught to them and discussed with them. So when you're doing fiction, non-fiction, poetry, even to put it out there, today we are going to be reading a book that is fiction. So what do you think that you're going to be saying? Is it real facts? No. It's a story. It's make-believe characters. This is what they have to know. Today, another day, you could probably say, today we are going to do poetry, where there's going to be rhyme and rhythm and we are going to sing it like a song. So they can see the difference and they will kind of, gravitate towards something that they like. So even giving them the choices of saying, so today, would you like to read fiction or non-fiction? What would you want to go for today? Maybe you'll have some students say, I want to do non-fiction because I love learning about sharks. I want to know more about it. So they would go for a book.
Even reluctant writers, for example, they will go first for poetry writing because they have to write fewer lines. You will see the very young writers, they will start, I love read it, whatever. They will in shorter sentences, or they'll try to match it up, rhyme it up. It comes 2-3 lines. Yeah.
The first big challenge that I feel is if the child is not able to decode the words. Decoding is very, very important. Only if you decode do you understand what the word is. So decoding is important for comprehension. The minute you are able to decode a word and understand what it says, then the reading comprehension happens. So this is how it is. Word reading, and then if you can read the word, then with language comprehension, you already have the language. Because if you read a word and you don't know what it means, then it doesn't make sense either. But if you can read the word and you have the language comprehension, then it equals to the reading comprehension. So if a child is facing a challenge, is probably not able to decode the word, probably not able to read the word, and also the next step is probably not able to understand a new unfamiliar word. There are ways to try to understand the word is by using context clues. In context, what that is word. But if the text is too complex and it's not a, age at his age level or reading level, probably he will lose meaning.
So what you suggest, suppose I give a book to my child and my child is reading those books and he or she has finished multiple books. How do I know how much of a comprehension has happened? And where do I stop and say, okay, do you really understand the text you're reading? Are you building your vocabulary? Do you know the meaning of the words that you see in the text? How do I, as a parent, figure it out?
When a child reads a book, first of all, you have to be very involved when the child is reading. I know we have big numbers in the school, in our classrooms, and it's not possible. But you can engage with, when they're reading, you go up to them and just at the page they're reading, ask a question. That will be one way of doing it. So you know that are they actually just flipping pages or they are reading over there. So you need to be well versed with the book, and then you start questioning about that. Okay, so what happened before this? What do you predict is going to happen? So you are getting them to be thinking and being engaged with the book. So you automatically know. Pick up a word from there. It's a new word for me. It looks very big. Was it hard? Okay, yes. She may say it's very easy. What meaning did you make and how did you make the meaning? Then you know, did you really know the word? Or he just, like your beetroot example you gave us earlier on, he's just decoding in a way that he's thinking that the word looks similar, so he's called it beetroot, but the word is not right for the text, which means he has not made meaning of that word. And that's where you go back and teach him how to make meaning of the word. Because if the vocabulary is not understood, the comprehension is, the whole book is not going to be there, right?
See children with a gap between their ability to read, because you can give them a massive book and these kids can read through the words. But you see them unable to comprehend because one, they're either not ready yet, or two, they're not reading age-appropriate books. They're reading books much higher than their levels. Have you seen that happen? And how do you sort of pull back and give them the right book if that's the case?
That happens all the time. Sometimes they want to feel that, that they're reading books that are at a much higher level. They want to feel good about it. But how much comprehension is happening is something that we need to think about. It could be a more complex text. It could not be at their reading level. So that's like myself and Ms. Jyotsna believe in that you do not take away the book from the child. Don't say you cannot read this book. This is not at your level. But we want to guide them. You want to guide them to pick up a book that is probably at their reading level and interest level is one thing. If you want to read if the child really loves the book and say, why don't we read it together? With something that we can do. So a read aloud really helps. Even if it's a chapter book and a novel, you can do it together. Where
it's an older child, an 8-year-old.
We are reading.
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. We are reading right now Charlotte's Web with our 4th graders. So would you call the 4th graders a little older or what? Yeah. Okay. So we're reading. You won't believe it, when we chose the book, there were a couple of kids who said, oh, we have read it before. I said, no, but we are going to read it differently. So, and we read it and they are enjoying themselves thoroughly. Because how much do they really focus on, complex vocabulary? Or even the character, as like walking in the character's shoes, understanding the characters, understanding what's deeply happening in the story, the plot, the theme. They're not thinking about that. But when you give them that exposure, when you're reading aloud with them and you're talking about all these different concepts over there, that's when they are actually going to look at reading as something else. And then they will probably apply it in the next book that they will be reading. So this is a great way to do it.
We often tell the kids, bedtime, go and read now. They're tired by the end of the day.
Yeah.
Unless you wake them up with a passion about reading by being with them. And if they pick up a big fat book to read, as Ms. Uma put it, don't tell them that it's too big for them or too much for them. You actually start saying, oh, you really like this book? You want to read it? Let's try 2 ways. I can read it to you is one way. The other way is you can try to read it. Also, there are so many books full of magic. And just like Harry Potter, why don't you pick up a book, that is different than this, and I can read this to you and you read on your own a book which is full of magic and spells and things like that. So you're giving that option to the child. You're not taking away the authority in your hand. You're not taking it in your hand that you have to read this, and you're not taking away the desire for the child to feel that, I'm able to read and my parents are not letting me.
The excitement. You're not robbing him of the excitement.
But we know that they're not ready for the book.
Yeah.
So we can't steal that from
Is it
them.
okay to provide a dictionary, or will the dictionary take away the joy of reading while they're reading?
Well, it would.
I
It
would
would.
too.
Yeah.
How
it
many of us
definitely
actually
would.
look at it?
Yeah.
We start making meaning.
Yeah, it does become a chore.
So,
that.
have you had parents coming and tell you, and I see a lot of people telling me this, whenever I ask my child to read, he immediately goes to the comics. Now, he or she is reading, so is that a good thing? Or they're reading comics, so it's not necessarily a good thing. How would you look at reading comics?
I sometimes get confused because now we use the word more graphic novels, than comics. Comics were like Archie and all that, which parents didn't want the kids to read because culturally they didn't really. I'm talking about, But now when we see the graphic novels, they're amazing, and especially novels which have been turned into graphic novels. Kids get so much out of it,
Yeah.
And looking at the pictures, they're getting the feeling.
Why not? Absolutely. Yeah. So why not? If you have a reluctant reader who doesn't want to read and doesn't look at a book that's a chapter book with so many words in it and feels kind of apprehensive to read it, but is actually more going towards, gravitating more towards comics, why not? He's picking up a book, he's opening the pages, he's reading, he's making those connections. So why not? That will be really good, actually. Maybe that could be the first step into getting to read more. So, and comics are fun too. I mean, they are fun and they are literacy. So I would say that's wonderful. And like graphic novels are also really amazing.
Yeah, one of our students who never liked reading, he picked the first book he has enjoyed is a graphic novel, and now he just asks his mom to go on Amazon and buy for him as many graphic novels as he can.
Saying my kids are only reading the Dogman series, is that okay? That's fine.
They're building stamina. You're starting to read with Dogman, which is, fewer words, easier. You have illustrations and pictures and all of that to support. But that starts your reading. And then you're going to build stamina to read even more. And then you're going to go back for something more complex. Yeah. So I wouldn't say no to comics or graphic novels. Of course, the Wimpy Kids is very, the Diary of the Wimpy Kids is very popular. They love
Captain
it.
Underpants.
Yes, they make all those connections with, they relate to it because they're as naughty, as mischievous. They have this feeling, why take it away from them? But gently, we have to encourage them to read more and more genres and more richer literature is something that we should
And you can't just tell them, okay, read this book. This is good for you.
Yeah.
Spend the time to read with them. Get them.
How do you choose a book? I'm just going to make you answer this a little more. So how do you, as a parent, what do you do to choose a book for and with your child?
Different ways of doing it. One is be involved, be aware of what is age appropriate for content-wise as well as language-wise for the child, because you can, when you're reading aloud, do a little higher reading. But when left to themselves, they should be reading what they are able to identify with words, decode words to their reading level. I would go book shopping with them. I would have a library in my small one. I'm not asking to have a huge big library. We have book bins, which with interesting books, because by now we gauge that our child likes books, which are where there is a lot of action, or there's a lot of emotion, or there is a realistic fiction, or some kids like only non-fiction. So you build up that library with that mixed kinds of genres and push them to encourage. Have incentives like what you call a choice board. Read 3 realistic fictions and 1 fantasy if they don't like fantasy and they like only realistic fiction. Choose 3 realistic fictions and 1 fantasy, you get a treat. So that's one way of doing it,
Yeah.
Book shopping is very important.
Yeah. Giving them the choice and you being there as well. Going together, asking them if they would prefer.
So where reading is concerned, we firmly believe that children should have a choice and a voice. You can give them the support they need, but don't take away the choice of book as a genre they want to read and the type of books they want to read. So if you go book shopping, have a pact. You choose the one you want and I'll choose one for you.
So that's great. And we've spoken so much about reading, and the other side of that coin is writing, right? So how important is writing for children? The younger ones and the older ones. What does it do to their brain? How does it help them?
In every way, because as important as reading is, so is writing, because that's your way to express yourself. They have to express themselves. So I would say even starting from when they are really young, for them to see you. Everything I think to a certain extent is modeling. So they see you writing, they would want to write too. Kids would learn. So giving them a sheet of paper or whatever, a whiteboard, giving them markers, felt pens, whatever it may be, pencils, giving them, encouraging them to even pick it up and to start making their squiggles and doodles over there is a good way to start. So encouraging them to write at any age is very important.
And you take a step forward. Don't just let them squiggle and leave it there. What did you write? Wow.
Absolutely.
Don't tell them this is just a squiggle and I don't understand. I know the siblings might come and tell them that. But you as a parent or even encourage the older sibling to ask the child to read, because he had some thought when he was making those, lines and circles and the zigzags and
Exactly.
all that.
So giving them some independent time, depending on the age that we are talking about, for them to even start writing and then going back and having a conversation about it. So what is this? What were you writing? What does this mean? So that's a good thing, especially for very young kids. If they are making those doodles and those squiggles, you can also show them how soon they will be writing. So what is this that you were writing? And then you say, drawing. Probably this is, watermelon. Really? Is that a watermelon? Maybe I can write it for you. So picking up that pencil and then writing it beside it, labeling it by saying watermelon, and maybe you sounding it out, even, just saying watermelon. They're making those connections there. I'm drawing something. It's a watermelon. We can write about it. And as they, grow older, they're going to be able to do that as well. Yeah.
Become better at expressing themselves.
Yeah.
So what are some techniques you would sort of use to help students who struggle with writing, with expressing themselves? How would you help them really and show you that you've seen children who had those struggles, and how have you seen them overcome it?
So there are different levels, right? The lower elementary, the upper elementary, then the high school and the middle school. So we need to be, thinking about which level we are talking about. So lower elementary, if you feel the kids are, struggling to write, one way to start them off is to get them to draw. You're going to write a story now if you want. Let's first draw those pictures that you would like to.
Yeah, the middle, the beginning, the middle and the end.
So
So first they draw it out and then they write 1 sentence or 2 sentences.
Exactly. So getting them to draw and talk about their drawing. Write it down. So it doesn't matter. And one very important thing is also to tell them that do not question them on the spelling. What have you written? Look at, especially we are talking about lower elementary. I'm talking about grade 1, kindergarten to grade 2. Even to pick up a pencil and to write is a big thing. They should feel confident that they're going to write. So looking at those pictures and being even whatever they want to express, the spelling may not be there. The capitalization may not be there, punctuation. It doesn't matter. Just give them the independence and the freedom to write. And then we can go back to teaching concepts. Sophia,
It's
yeah.
very important that when they are writing, and we have noticed this in schools, especially over here, kids they have the eraser in their hand.
Yeah.
They're always erasing because their spelling is incorrect or their handwriting is not good. So there's so much going on at that time. There is thinking, there is writing, and I want to be correct.
Yeah.
So we, in whatever way we have been trained, keep those erasers away. You can scratch out if that's your first draft. Go back to revising and editing your work. That's a skill you teach them at the end.
So you basically write it all out. Just
Put your thoughts in, because reading and writing are very much connected.
Right.
Reading is input. When you're reading, everything goes into your head, and there is so much of internalization of your thoughts and feelings
Right.
and everything going on. Whereas when you're writing, it's an output. You're expressing. So that's why they always say, read like the writer. What is the writer trying to say? When you pick that up right from the beginning, you are learning that language of the writer. You're learning those ideas of the writers, and you're putting it and expressing it in a piece of writing.
So when it comes to reading, there are so many ways for you to understand if they are up to their level by their ability to comprehend age-appropriate books. All of those techniques to understand if a child is actually at standard or at par with their level or their grade. How do you evaluate that when it comes to writing?
So, yes, again, has to be age appropriate. If you have a kindergartner who is able to write at least one sentence or one, depending on what the picture is and what he wants to express, writing one sentence is good enough. But we want to, again, build writing stamina. So prodding them a little bit, can we think about the picture more? Would you like to add a little bit more detail? Is there something else that we would like to write about? Do you want to think about that? So to add a little bit more is something that you can slowly stretch their writing, stamina and capacity to do so. Once they go up grade levels, it depends on what you are expecting them to write or what they're writing. Sometimes there is free writing. They can write whatever they want, like a quick 10 minutes, just write whatever you want. Write lots more, please do. You want to write a little bit, but just getting them into the writing habit is important.
At the school level, I can understand as teachers, we can do that.
Yeah.
But I can give myself an example. When I was young, I used to read a lot too. I faced the same problem. I might not have understood what I was reading, and there was no resources for me to go and learn how to read it in a way that I can comprehend or write what I have read about. There was school that taught us that, but it wasn't much. So what kind of tips and techniques can a parent, take that they can help the child in writing? Because it doesn't come from school, or if they notice a child is reading a lot, but it's not translating to writing for whatever reason. How can we help them as a parent?
The same, I would say. What do you say, Ms. Jyotsna, to give some more writing time for them to write as a
Give them
parent?
the free time, free choice of writing. Again, choice and voice. Write about something. Keep a journal. Now, I know that kids are not going to pick up. Every kid is not a writer.
Yeah.
We have to understand that, and we have to respect that. But giving them those little tasks, make a list of things we're going shopping. Make a list. What do we need to buy? It comes a little earlier. Yeah. They can make a list. As they grow older, they can have a list which has correct spellings and all those things. Yeah. That can be one. Okay, I want you to, make out an invite. Involve them in those things which are not like a task, doing as writing as a task.
Because when you think of, I want to improve my child's writing, it automatically sounds like a chore. Like in the child's head, we give them tasks like, why don't you read this book and write about what you've read? But write an invite, make a list, or write some simple instructions for somebody to read. All of these are more natural. They all bring out, it doesn't seem like a task that the child has to do. They don't look at it like
absolutely. Having a small a writing corner where you have a lot of paper, or you made recycled paper into little books and keeping it aside, have a lot of pencils and markers there, can give them that initiative to go there and the motivation to go sit and write. They can write about anything. Today, like you said, they can write about they can write a recipe. You may not even have to tell them to do it, but they would write a story and say, today I've written a story. Would you like to see it? So sitting with them and encouraging them to do that is important. And I totally agree that the the easiest thing is to make lists. They will love it. Making shopping lists of colors, lists
When you're
of things
traveling,
around the
you know.
house. Yeah, that's really wonderful. And then,
But don't force them to write.
yeah, it
Don't
shouldn't
force them
feel
to
like
write.
like a chore. Yeah.
Give them that time. Okay, here's paper, color, you draw. Okay, if you don't want to write, draw. Sometimes the drawing, you can pick it up. Hey, let's talk about this drawing. Why don't you write it? We are trying it. It's not necessary that what we are saying is going to happen with every child. It will happen maybe with one. It may not happen. Then you have to think of another way of doing it. But writing is something very natural, and the love for writing doesn't happen with everyone.
Yeah, it has.
There are
It's okay. It's okay for some child that's only reading, some child that's only writing.
we had
Anyway, they're
in school,
Yeah, in school.
It happens in any case.
It doesn't in the way that, translates to what they're reading. I mean, they can write to an extent. But if you as a parent somehow feel if you develop the writing skill, but it's not innately coming from the child, it's okay to let go is what you're saying.
Give that time, think about it, but you have to somehow get them to write also, because they are all connected.
Yeah. I think the school needs to give them more opportunities to write. And when they get opportunities there, they're going to bring it back home as well as
We always say that when we were growing up, the whole class wrote about a rainy day. Again, we come to choice and voice. You give them that, choose what you want to write about. What was the worst moment you had? What was the best moment you had? What was one holiday that you really remember? So everybody's not writing the same thing.
Yeah.
Sometimes, somehow, if you ask the child who's passionate about football to write about their favorite match, they have so much more to say than them asking them how was today or write about a rainy day, for example. They'd have so much to say. Even I don't know what to talk about.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it's good to give them the choice and also to encourage them to write about things they love the most. Because you were talking about football. Invariably, you have the boys write only about football. What would you like to write about today? Football. I would like. So giving them more. Yes, you can write about football, but can we think of a couple of other topics that you really love and you would like to write? Can we think of something? It can be even as simple as hot chocolate. It can be marshmallows. It can be anything. But can we write 5 topics down there that you would like to write about? So every day they can pick a topic to write about. But those are the ones that they made a choice about and something that they are passionate and they love to write. So that way they will have much more to write than us kind of thrusting in a topic,
To the list of football, ask them to write about video games, Fortnite.
They will write.
Oh yeah,
draw and write.
They would love it.
I also remember this, when they were after recess, we had some writing period or something, and they'll say, time to write, and they'll, no, we don't want to write, we hate writing, and they'll be, throwing the pencil, picking the thing. So we said, okay, today you're going to do something different. Everybody writes a note to somebody in the class, but everybody has to get one note from somebody.
Yeah.
They started passing notes to each other.
They don't want to be left behind.
Yeah.
That is there. You have to then build that social skill in them, that, make sure that nobody is left behind. Right. Or just choose another way. You write to the person on the table. Maybe you write that something you really liked he did. Or maybe you were upset with him because he or she did something to you, to be able to express themselves. Of course, in school we do it. I don't know, at home, Sunday, everybody's sitting down. Okay, we are going to write how we felt this week was. It's not easy. It's not easy, but it's a start somewhere.
It is. And these are things they can relate to.
Yeah.
So with computers and laptops and the art of, writing on a keyboard, that has come into the education system and in the world now. Does it mean that writing the old-fashioned way is dying, or is it something that we need to hold on to? How do we balance both?
I would say balance both. The first drafts can be writing with pencil, paper, pen or whatever, and then the final can be, for publishing, can be on the laptop. That's one thought process, one thing.
You felt writing should be, the old-fashioned way should be?
Yeah, old-fashioned way, sometimes it helps them to express better. They are focusing more on their writing, and handwriting is important. They are losing the art of writing itself. So if they're getting into too much of technology, but at the same time, I feel they have to be able to write. And I do think that idea of having the balance is good. So you do the first draft on paper using pencil and paper, and then using you can type up the final draft.
Because I think with the computer, right, with the spell checker and whatnot and the automatic autocorrect and all of that, a lot of our thinking process is taken away from us.
That is why the drafting becomes important.
Becomes embedded.
Even though we'll not let the spelling or the grammar hold us, and have a control on us while we are on our thoughts.
Right.
We still
We
write.
make an effort.
Yeah.
We make
Yeah.
a little bit of an effort.
Yes.
So speaking of computers, with the introduction of ChatGPT and DeepSeek, are you seeing an impact of those tools, I'd want to say, on your kids' writing? Do you see children coming up with ChatGPT written answers in your work? And are you able to identify that, hey, this is not written by you, go back?
So as an educator, it's easier. I don't know for a parent, but as an educator, if we are used to our students and we know their style of writing and we know what they can write, what is their stamina to write, what kind of vocabulary they use. When we know that, you know the child, you know his nature, you know the style of writing, you know his voice, and the choice of words. But when it's done on ChatGPT, you can immediately see the difference. Actually, you can, yes. Because you see that
you can
there
see
are
it in
words
adult
that are
writing
not.
also and ideas.
Yeah, so you can see.
But when I have a doubt, I have copied and pasted on to check on plagiarism. That I have done very often, especially in 5th grade, 4th grade, 5th grade.
So it lets you know, is it, that this text came
Because if I might doubt, and then I can always say, write it in your own words. So one of the skills we do teach the kids is you copy the idea and then write it in your own words.
Got it. How do you have that conversation with children that, hey, because it's a tool that's very freely available to you.
Yeah.
How do parents educate children? And it also touches upon the moral values at some point, right? Making everything easy where you don't have to put in the effort. What do you think is the conversation as parents we should have with children to reduce the amount of ChatGPT usage or make sure they...
Or is that the way to go? Because it is available, right? So
It's a tool.
Yes, yes.
Use it as a tool.
Yes.
It's always believed you can steal an idea, but don't copy an idea.
yeah.
So you can use ChatGPT for an idea, but don't copy the idea and write exactly. Where's your thinking? Are you going to be dumb all your life? Are you going to kill your thinking and your thought? You cannot do that. How much we can educate them is just a start. We don't know. We know it's going in directions which are going to be uncontrollable.
Yeah.
We have to do our best for them.
But encouraging them to come up with their own creativity, with their own imagination, with their own choice of words is so important because that is you. Whereas ChatGPT probably would not be able to express the thoughts as much in your voice. So that is something that we can talk to the kids. Of course, it also depends on how much access they have. If they have unlimited access and they can get onto it and then write a paper like that, there's nothing much we can do.
At home.
Yeah,
they
at
can
home,
do it at home,
you
but they
do
can
it
do
at home.
that. Yeah.
But
And in classrooms, if it is always nice for them to start everything in the class.
Yeah.
Not give so much at home that we have no control. Parents cannot be watching all the time. Not realistic. We cannot be watching over them all the time. So start. We see where you're going. We can understand that, yes, you are able to write or you're not able to write.
I liked your idea of steal the idea and not copy the idea.
Copy the idea.
It's something I have struggled with. Is it okay to take an idea from somebody and develop it, or should it be always your own idea?
No, it's absolutely okay. We are stealing recipes. We are stealing ideas from the books. But unless we put the quote or acknowledge that this line is from so-and-so book, we can develop it in our own way.
that's how reading and writing is connected. The children are always, I read something there and I'm writing it in the same style. That's how they're borrowing ideas from all the different books that they're reading.
So maybe something that we should teach them, that they should be forthcoming in saying this is not my own idea, but
Yeah.
I've developed an idea, a style that I really like.
Yes.
I don't think even that is necessary. If after they are reading it, and it's, unless you have specifically told them to create something out of their own, which is not going to be easy. You'll get the same ideas from everybody. It depends on the limitation of the work you've given them. They can read and they read the newspaper. Something happened, they want to use it, but in their own, express it in their own way. That's okay. If the ideas come from, we are taking ideas every time from everywhere.
So I'm going to talk a little about learning difficulties here, just touch again that topic as well. As educators, you do identify students with learning difficulties. And it immediately, I feel, escalates to an extent, especially if it's schools who are identifying kids with learning disabilities. What would you recommend would be the steps to follow if a teacher pulls up a parent and says, hey, there are some sort of learning difficulties here, or maybe a slowness in learning? What would you recommend for them to do?
For the parents?
For the parent to do? How would they go about it? Because immediately assuming that, hey, my child has dyslexia, or running through those assumptions is very hard. We don't know what are the resources available to us in India or in Chennai. Do you have any thoughts around that?
So it is a good thing to first talk to the teacher all about it, to understand what are the gaps, what are the difficulties the child is facing, where is the child lagging behind. So first actually understand from the teacher who is dealing with the child every day to find out what those challenges are. If the gaps are pretty wide, and you can make out that there is something totally the child is lagging behind, or a struggling learner or a reader, it is good for the parents to think about it and to find out what is the next step to do. So a good thing would be to ask the teacher itself what needs to be done and to find out. But the only thing I feel that parents should not be worried about is to immediately jump into a conclusion thinking the child has a learning difficulty. Right. That may not be possible, because there is a process that needs to go. To understand, you need to do an assessment to find out where the child is with their reading and writing skills and what are the gaps that they are finding. Is it that the child has, is it problems with decoding? Is it problems with comprehension? What is the problem needs to be found out, and only an assessment can do that. So I think that parents should not fear it and should try to do an assessment as per the guidance of the teacher.
What is this assessment? Can you talk a little about it?
Well, there are two kinds of assessments. I mean, if you have a special, like a special ed room at, the department at school itself, maybe the teacher herself, a special educator, can do an assessment to find out, a very informal assessment to find out what the gaps are. Can talk to the teacher, talk to the parent about it. Now, does the child need remedial instruction is something that they have to decide. So is it the gaps in such a way that we can quickly close the gaps? What kind of instruction is needed is something that a teacher would be, when you do an assessment, would be able to tell you better.
You cannot just say that this child is dyslexic.
I do not agree.
And if you're not the expert, don't do it. You're only a homeroom teacher. There are experts in your school who work in a department, refer to that. They do the test. They have their, the resources to do the test. Yes. And they sit down with the parents, the homeroom teacher, and they will let them know.
I would like to add something to that, to say that, as you were asking me, it's good for parents to understand earlier and not fear to do an assessment, whichever way it is. Either if they're doing it in the school itself, or they're referred to go elsewhere to do an assessment. Because early intervention is the best way to close the gaps. So the earlier, the better.
I've heard many times parents come back and say that, the teacher keeps saying my child's comprehension is not good. I think that is something, it's scary, A teacher cannot be saying that. What is the reason for comprehension? Is the vocabulary decoding the word, or is it the decoding of the word itself? What is it that is the reason the child's comprehension is not there? The reading is not enough. So the first time the parent tells my child has no comprehension, they think that he's not understanding. But there are reasons for not understanding. Can be something that is more technical or needs more looking into, and that can be some gaps in the reading which has not built up that ability in the child to comprehend.
Or just lack of interest.
Or the lack of interest can be also there.
Yeah. So it could be so many different things, and no need for a parent to immediately jump to conclusion.
No.
They're really scared.
Yeah, they're really worried. Yeah. And sometimes it holds them back from even doing an assessment to find out where the child is at with their reading and writing skills. So, the best thing to do is to address it. Yeah.
They should not be afraid. If there is something like this, don't step back, that, I don't want the world to know that my child is dyslexic. Seek help.
Yeah,
There's much out
it's
there.
very
Yeah.
important. I feel it's coming to terms with it and seeking out the right resources is the greatest struggle because
Exactly.
they are struggling with the idea of it a lot. Thank you so much, Ms. Uma and Ms. Johnson. I really hope this conversation has been useful to you to understand how to help your children read better, write better, and enjoy themselves by doing so. Please share this with anybody who has a young reader at home and don't forget to subscribe for more such content. Thank you.